There is a particular kind of invisibility that has nothing to do with being unseen. I was at every holiday dinner, every birthday, every Sunday call that my mother scheduled with the quiet authority of a woman who considered family attendance non-negotiable. My name came up in conversations regularly, just never in the way that counted, never attached to anything resembling acknowledgement or credit or the basic recognition that I had built something real and was quietly holding more than my share of the weight. I was present the way furniture is present, assumed, functional, unremarkable until something needed doing, and then briefly noted, and then forgotten again the moment the need passed. My name is Caleb Merritt. I am the middle child of 3, the only one who left Grover Mills, North Carolina, the only one who built a life outside the geography of where we were raised. My older brother Russell had married young and stayed local, moving through a series of jobs that never quite became careers, each one launched with enthusiasm and abandoned with an excuse, sustained by the unshakable belief that his real opportunity was always just ahead. My younger sister Dana was genuinely bright, quick with a joke, magnetic in the way certain people are who have never had to work at being liked. But her life had the quality of a photograph, perpetually out of focus, always almost resolving into something stable. My mother Patricia was warm in the deep, unconditional way that certain mothers are, and blind in equal measure, with a talent for reframing failure as circumstance and circumstance as temporary and temporary as basically fine. I loved all 3 of them. I want to say that plainly and without irony, because it is the only way the rest of this makes sense. The love was real. It was the engine of everything that followed. The reason the spreadsheet existed, the reason I sent money at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night without complaint. You do not quietly pay someone's electric bill for 6 years because you are indifferent to them. You do it because their voice is inside you somewhere, because their struggles register in your body like your own, because love in its most honest and least celebrated form is often just the willingness to solve a problem without being asked and without expecting to be thanked. I had left at 22 with a business degree and a secondhand laptop and a momentum that looked like confidence, but was closer to controlled panic. The forward push of someone who understands that standing still in certain circumstances is the same as going under. I moved to Charlotte. I built a freelance practice in content strategy and corporate communications over 8 deliberate years until it generated the kind of income that allowed me to think in years rather than weeks. I did not tell my family the details. This was partly my nature. I have always been the quiet one, the internal processor, the one who shares selectively, and partly a considered instinct that displaying stability inside a family where stability was perpetually scarce would produce resentment faster than relief. So I kept it vague, modest car when I visited, noncommittal answers about the apartment. I existed in their imagination somewhere in the unremarkable middle, doing okay. Nothing extraordinary, fine. The help began the way these things always begin, small enough to feel like a single gesture rather than the first stone in a foundation. Russell's car needed a repair and his shift depended on it. $400 sent the same day, framed as a loan in the text message and understood by both of us as something else entirely. Then Dana's electricity, $212 on a Thursday night preceded by 4 apologetic paragraphs. Then my mother's property tax, mentioned once in passing in the particular tone she used when she was hoping someone would step forward, and I stepped forward $1,100 quietly because that is what I did, and then it was not small anymore. It had become the steady, invisible architecture of my financial life, a column of transfers I tracked in a spreadsheet on my desktop with the discipline of someone who understands that unnamed things have a way of becoming unmanageable. Over 6 years, that spreadsheet grew to $63,420. Not dramatically, not all at once. Line by line, emergency by emergency. In the patient and uncelebrated way that certain people hold families together while the families look right through them. It was a Wednesday evening in November, the kind of gray, unremarkable night that has no business being the setting for something that changes you. I had finished a client deliverable late and made dinner late and was sitting at my desk with a glass of water and the specific hollowness of someone who has been productive all day and feels nothing for it. My phone showed a missed video call from my mother and then a follow-up text we're all on, join when you can, just catching up. I set my fork down and opened the app and tapped into the call. They did not hear me join. This happens sometimes with video calls, a lag in the audio, a delay in the notification. A half-second gap between presence and recognition. I was there, my camera on my small rectangle present in the grid of faces, but none of them were looking at the grid. They were looking at each other mid-conversation, mid-laugh, in the easy-flowing way of people who have been talking for a while and have settled into a rhythm. I could see Russell leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed and his expression loose and entertained. I could see Dana with her hand over her mouth the way she laughs when something has caught her genuinely off guard. I could see my mother nodding with that particular slow nod that meant she was agreeing with something she found satisfying. I watched for a moment, unclear on the context, waiting to catch the thread of what they were discussing. Then Russell said my name. He said it the way you say the name of someone who is not in the room and you are certain will not be. Casually, without lowering his voice, without any of the small physical adjustments people make when they are aware they might be overheard. He said my name and then he said something about my work, using air quotes I could see clearly on the screen, and then he said the word struggling. And Dana made a sound of agreement that was almost sympathetic except for the undercurrent of satisfaction that I recognized because I had grown up listening to her voice and knew every register of it. Then my mother said it. Not Russell, not Dana, who I might have half expected in a certain mood. My mother, Patricia Merritt, who I had paid $1,100 in property taxes for 2 springs running, who I had sent grocery gift cards to in the months when her fixed income ran short, who I had driven 4 hours round trip to take to a specialist appointment because she didn't want to ask Russell and inconvenience him. My mother looked at the camera with the comfortable expression of someone stating a thing everyone already knows, and she said, clearly and without hesitation, that I had always been the one most likely to amount to nothing, that it was sad really, that for all my talk of building something I was frankly a pathetic failure who had never figured out what the rest of them had figured out about life. She said pathetic failure the way you say a thing you have thought privately so many times it has stopped feeling cruel and started feeling like fact. The silence in my apartment was total. I sat very still for what felt like a long time, but was probably 4 or 5 seconds. My water glass was in my hand. The call grid glowed on my screen, 3 faces easy and warm with each other, laughing now at something Russell had added, the moment already moving on the way careless moments do. I looked at my own small rectangle in the corner of the screen, my face lit by the desk lamp, expression unreadable even to me. I did not announce myself. I did not say anything at all. I closed the app. I set my phone face down on the desk and sat in the quiet of my apartment and looked at the wall and let the thing that had just happened arrange itself into its true shape. This was not a shock in the way surprises are shocking. It was a shock in the way that confirmation is shocking. The awful clarity of hearing spoken aloud, a thing you had always suspected was true, but had spent years hoping was not. They had never seen me. Not really all those years, all those transfers, all those 11 o'clock text messages answered without complaint. None of it had built anything in their minds except the comfortable assumption that I would always be there and would never need to be valued. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the spreadsheet. I looked at it for a long time in the gray November quiet. Then I began to make a different kind of plan. I did not make any announcements. That was the first and most important decision, made quietly in the gray November night while the call grid was still glowing in my recent history and the spreadsheet was open on my screen. No confrontation, no explanation, no carefully composed message laying out what I had heard and how it had landed and what I expected by way of apology. I had watched enough family arguments unspool over the years to understand that confrontation gives people something to push against, a surface for deflection and counter accusation, and the particular revisionist creativity that relatives deploy when they are caught saying true things they cannot afford to admit are true. I would give them nothing to push against. I would simply stop. The first thing I stopped was the automatic transfer I had set up 18 months earlier for my mother's monthly shortfall. $400, first of every month, moving from my account to hers with the quiet regularity of a utility payment. I logged into my bank on a Thursday morning with my coffee still hot beside me and I canceled it with 3 clicks. No drama lived in those 3 clicks. They were the quietest thing I had ever done. Then I turned off the notifications for the family group chat, not left it, not made a show of departure, just silenced it so that the messages continued to arrive but landed without sound, without urgency, without the reflexive pull to respond that I had conditioned myself into over years of being the one who answered. The group chat was mostly Russell forwarding memes and Dana posting photographs of food, and my mother sending good morning messages with the small sun emoji she had recently discovered and deployed with enormous enthusiasm. I let it all accumulate unread. It felt strange at first, like ignoring a knock at a door you have always opened. Then it felt like something else. It felt like rest. Dana texted me directly 11 days after the call. Not about money, not yet, the need hadn't surfaced yet. Just a casual reaching out, a "how are you?" A funny thing happened today, the kind of message that exists to maintain the thread of connection without requiring anything particular from either person. I read it. I did not respond. I set the phone down and went back to my work, and the guilt I expected to feel was quieter than I had anticipated, buried under something steadier and more unfamiliar, something that took me several days to correctly identify as self-respect. Russell called on a Tuesday. He left a voicemail that was jovial and brief. "Hey man, haven't heard from you. Everything good, call me back." The ease of it was its own kind of answer. This was a man who had borrowed money from me 11 times in 6 years and had never once called simply to ask how I was doing without some eventual turn toward need. The joviality was not affection. It was maintenance. He was checking that the resource was still available, the way you check a tap before you fill a glass. I listened to the voicemail twice, not out of wavering, but because I wanted to hear it clearly, to let it confirm what I already knew. I did not call back. My mother noticed last, which surprised me and then did not. She was the center of the family's gravity, the one everyone orbited, and people at the center of gravity often have the least accurate sense of what is circling them. Her first text came 3 weeks after the call, cheerful and unaware, asking if I had remembered her birthday was coming and whether I would be driving up. I had driven up every year for 7 years. I had never missed it. I read the message in the parking lot of a grocery store and sat with it for a moment, the familiar pull of obligation working against the newer, quieter pull of something I was only beginning to trust. I texted back that I had a work commitment that weekend. It was not entirely untrue. The birthday came and went. I sent a card. Paper, mailed it 2 days early so it would arrive on time, because I was not trying to be cruel and cruelty had never been the point. There was no check inside for the first time in 6 years. Just a card, just my handwriting, just my name. I imagined her opening it at the kitchen table, and I felt something complicated that I did not try to simplify. Love and clarity are not opposites. They can exist in the same moment, pulling in different directions, and you can honor both without letting either one make the decision for you. The silence stretched into December. And in December, the calls started coming differently, less jovial, less casual, carrying a new frequency underneath the familiar voices, the particular frequency of people who have just noticed that something they relied on has stopped working and cannot yet identify what it was. The calls changed in December the way weather changes, gradually and then all at once. Russell called 3 times in 1 week, each voicemail slightly less casual than the one before, the joviality thinning like paint applied too many times over the same surface, until the texture underneath begins to show. The third message dropped the pretense almost entirely. He had a situation. He said nothing major, just a timing thing with a bill, and if I could call him back when I got a chance, that would be great. I listened to it on a Sunday morning with my coffee and the particular stillness of someone who has made a decision and is no longer fighting it. I did not call back. Dana's message came mid-December, and hers had a different quality, less entitled than Russell's, more genuinely distressed, which made it harder and which I think she understood it would. She had always known which register of herself was most effective with me. Her text was long, longer than she usually wrote, describing a shortfall with her rent and a timing issue with a paycheck, and ending with the sentence, "You're literally the only person I can ask," which had once felt like intimacy and now felt like a description of a system in which everyone else had been absolved of responsibility because I had always been willing to absorb it. I read the message 3 times. Then I opened my laptop and I did the thing I had been quietly preparing since November. I had spent the previous weeks organizing the spreadsheet into something presentable, not weaponized. I was deliberate about the distinction. I did not want a document that attacked. I wanted a document that simply told the truth in the plain, unambiguous language of numbers, the way a photograph tells the truth, without editorializing, without anger, just the clear and complete record of what had actually been happening while they had been constructing their version of who I was. I formatted it cleanly: date, recipient, amount, purpose. 6 years, every transfer, every gift card, every property tax payment and car repair and electricity bill and medical copay covered without announcement or expectation of return. $63,420. At the top of the document, I wrote one paragraph. Not a speech, not an accusation, just a statement of fact in 3 sentences. I had been supporting this family financially for 6 years. I had done it without being asked and without telling anyone. I was no longer going to do it, and I wanted everyone to have the full picture before drawing any further conclusions about who among us had failed to figure out what life required. I emailed it to Russell, Dana, and my mother on a Tuesday evening. Then I closed the laptop and made dinner and did not look at my phone for the rest of the night, not because I was afraid of the responses, but because I had nothing left to brace for. The thing was done. The truth was in the room. My mother called the following morning. She called 4 times before I answered, and when I did, her voice had a quality I had never heard in it before. Not anger, not defensiveness, but a kind of stunned quietness. As though the document had removed the floor from under a room she had lived in for years without questioning its construction. She said she hadn't known. She said it in the way people say things they mean, without the usual scaffolding of excuse or qualification. Just, I hadn't known, Caleb. I didn't know you were doing all of that. I told her I knew she hadn't known. I told her that was part of the problem. The silence on the line was long and full. Not hostile. Not comfortable. The specific silence of 2 people standing on either side of a truth that has just been named for the first time and cannot be unnamed. Russell sent a text that began with justifications and ended with something that was almost an apology. Not quite, not fully, but trending in that direction. The way a person moves toward a difficult thing in increments when they cannot bring themselves to go directly. Dana called and cried, genuinely I think, and said things that were self-aware enough to suggest she had been sitting with the document for hours before picking up the phone. I was not unkind to any of them. I was not cold. But I was different, and they could hear it, and I think that difference, steady, unhurried, no longer organized around their comfort, was more clarifying than anything I could have said in anger the night of the video call. Anger would have given them a role to play. This gave them only the truth, and the truth required something harder than a reaction. It required reckoning. I did not go home for Christmas that year. I spent it alone in my apartment with good food and a book and the profound, unfamiliar quiet of a person who has stopped carrying something very heavy and is only beginning to understand how heavy it actually was. It was the most peaceful holiday I could remember. In January, I set boundaries I had never set before. Clear ones, spoken plainly, without apology. I told my mother I loved her and would remain in her life, but would not be her financial safety net. I told Russell the same. I told Dana I believed in her capacity to build stability and would no longer participate in arrangements that suggested I didn't. These were not cruel conversations. They were honest ones which in this family amounted to the same territory, just arrived at from a different direction. The spreadsheet still lives on my desktop. I have not deleted it. It is not a monument to grievance. I do not open it and rehearse old wounds. It is something quieter than that. It is evidence of a version of myself that gave without limit and was not valued for it, kept not as a weapon, but as a reminder of what it cost to be invisible, and what it felt like to finally, at last, be seen, if only by myself. That turns out to be enough. More than enough. It turns out to be everything.